On July 28, 1952, Nevada man Truman Bethurum just finished his work outside the town of Mormon Mesa, Nevada. In the location Truman was located, once upon a time the area was covered by ocean. Truman was a seashell collector and decided to drive his truck up a hill to a location that was known for having fossilized seashells. Once he arrived at the hill in the dark, he searched for an hour but had no luck finding any. After this, Truman climbed back down in his truck and fell asleep. Soon, Truman woke up and would be startled to see someone or something outside his truck. In this episode, we will explore the alien encounter of Truman Bethurum. As Truman woke up in his truck on the night of July 28, 1952, he would be stunned to see 8 to 10 small beings around 4 feet tall outside the truck window. Although the beings were short, they had features similar to the typical man. They had light brownish skin, no wrinkles or any undesirable characteristics, and their hair was black and their eyes were dark. Truman would later say the beings dressed similar to Greyhound bus drivers. Then, as Truman sat in his truck, one of the beings began to speak to him. Truman didn't understand what it was saying though. The being noticed his confusion and then began speaking in what Truman would describe as perfect English. It said, "You name it." Truman responded by saying, "My God, you can speak English too?" At this point, Truman climbed out of his truck and then would be shocked to see a UFO around 75 yards away. It was silver and saucer shaped, appearing shiny as well. Truman would speak with the beings and shook hands with each one. There was what seemed to be a mutual respect for one another. Truman was curious as to who they were and what they wanted, so he asked who the leader was. The being informed them that their leader was on the craft. If he wanted to, he could come aboard and meet her. Truman obliged, and one of the beings gently grabbed his elbow and began to escort him to the craft. As they walked over, Truman sensed this being was very powerful and that Truman was at his mercy. As Truman got closer to the ship, he could make out more details. According to the beings, the diameter of the ship was around 300 feet. Truman noticed a 3-foot wide band that went around the craft around the center. Right above this, there was a door around 10 feet high and 4 feet wide. Truman would walk up a ramp and enter the ship. Inside, he would finally be introduced to the leader. The captain's name was Aura Rains. The being had light brownish skin with an attractive slender face and black hair. She wore a bright red dress and something that resembled a black blouse. Aura would invite Truman into her private space where the two would converse. The being would tell Truman that they were from the planet Clarion, which was on the opposite side of the sun. Due to its distance, and because it was behind the sun, we were not able to spot it. Aura and Truman would discuss several topics. First, Truman inquired how they were able to power their ships and travel so fast. Aura would inform him that the crafts were powered by the Earth's gravity. Her explanation, though, appeared to be too much for Truman to understand. The entity would then tell Truman about their home. Like we've seen in many other cases, the being described the planet as a utopia. There was never any wars, there was no disagreement, and the beings lived to a very old age. Everyone had everything they needed, and there was no social classes. According to Aura, the beings had the power to read minds and to see our planet from theirs. Truman would next hear from Aura that due to our violent nature and constant wars, we would not receive the information needed for long-distance space travel. She reiterated that they were tired of seeing us fight and that we couldn't be given advanced technology as we couldn't be trusted and might attack peaceful civilizations. Truman would speak with Aura for around 30 minutes total and then walk off the craft. This wouldn't be the last time, though, that Truman talked with the beings. He would allege to meet Aura and the beings 10 more times. After some time, Truman would detail his experience in his book, aboard a flying saucer in 1954. The book did very well, and Truman got his 15 minutes of fame, even appearing on The Betty White Show. Still, without question, Truman's claims were met with harsh criticism. Truman was one of many 1950s alien contactees, or people who claimed to speak with extraterrestrials. Usually contactees, unlike abductees, report positive experiences rather than negative. During this time, it is true many achieved fame by alleging to speak with extraterrestrials. So was Truman a con man, or did he actually have contact with these beings? Let's look at the arguments for and against this controversial figure. Proponents will say there's several reasons to believe him. One is that Truman stated the beings gave him a message we have heard all too often from experiencers and abductees. We are too violent as human beings. There are a number of cases, some of which we have covered on this channel, where extraterrestrials tell people how disappointed they are in our violent ways. A second thing that stands out too is the beings told Truman about their utopian planet. We often see this as beings tell people this. Truman also mentioned they spoke perfect English. This is a specific detail we have seen in many cases. Some believe that in these cases the beings are actually robots, and that explains the perfection in their voice. Some proponents will also say he described a very different alien species than usual. If he was creating a story, why wouldn't he just describe the beings as Nordic? Some of these details, which are tough to know, surely create intrigue in his case. But should they? It's important to point out just a few years before Truman made his claims, George Adamski achieved celebrity status by traveling the country and being paid to speak on his experiences. Still, Adamski reported meeting with Nordic aliens, while Truman alleged to meet with a species pretty different. One other thing to point out too is that Truman was alleged to be obsessed with Aura. It is said he hired a secretary simply because she possessed the same physical characteristics of Aura. Was Truman simply a man obsessed with Latino women? Or was this just him living out his fantasy? Or did possibly the being read his mind and Aura presented itself in the most attractive way possible? There are reasons, though, to be skeptical of this case. Truman definitely benefited both financially and gained much attention from his claims. During this time, many alien contactees achieved celebrity status, and it's not too hard to imagine one could desire this as well. Truman said the beings asked him to create an education center around extraterrestrials and stressed the importance of people learning about them. If Truman was picked, though, to be their human spokesperson, this raises the question, why didn't they provide Truman with any type of proof? At the end of the day, it appears that all Truman has is his word, and like many cases, witness credibility is a critical aspect, and Truman appears to possibly have been in it for the book deals and TV appearances. It doesn't definitely mean he fabricated the stories, but it makes them harder to believe.